goes to the root of those who are organizing this program. I mean, you mentioned of
Angel
Dr.
Yes.
Angel Kabono,
yeah,
of course.
A very loud voice when it comes to education in this country.
Yes,
he has spoken enormous about the free SHS. He has spoken about issues within the education sector concerning the secondary education. He has spoken extensively. When the issue of the selection of the new GES also came up, he spoke extensively on it, and he's the president of the National Graduate Teachers Association of Ghana. He's very loud when it comes to these issues.
I mean, he from NAGRAT. I mean, you know, in the news, there are a lot of people that you often hear them,
yeah.
and then they are consistent voice on issues, and he's been one of these consistent voices when it comes to education, leading the labor union on the side of NAGRAT. It is not surprising that the group will want to reach out to him. And looking at the topic that we're going to look at, I know we'll delve deeper into the topic, being on secondary education.
This is,
yes. I think that he may have spent a greater part of his adult life, young and adult life, in teaching young people and in operating within the secondary education sector. And so his inputs on governance will be key. His inputs on financing will be key. And of course, his inputs on management of these schools will be key. There are a lot other persons who are on this panel that as we go on, we'll be bringing to our viewers their academic credentials and also their standing in society. Dr. Edem Warbeck, we know she is a lecturer at the University of Ghana Business School from the finance department, and we are talking about financing of funding senior high school education. There's Yaobene Amponsa Irene Sam. You mentioned about Bernard Avlen, our very own Professor Atu Isuman. So I think that this panel is well balanced, in my opinion.
To give a better understanding of what is the secondary education in terms of when it comes to the governance and also the management and the financing, let's go to some of the issues that have really, affected the secondary education in this country. Issue with the CSSPS, issue with the financing, issue with accommodation in various schools, issue with double track, enormous, a lot of issues. And also issue about the financing, very important, we are going to talk about this. What are some of the key things that you would want to at least hear in this address that will help shape our secondary education in this country?
Philip, for the past 6 years, we've gotten a government that has extensively, if I mean extensively, some substantial amount of our money has been put into the senior high school and the secondary education. Any student who is eligible, who is willing and is available, can go to school for free. I mean, a lot of people have questioned its sustainability and how it has impacted on other things. But if you put it in context now, let's look at our educational system. You go through basic school, you go through so your basic school, which will include your lower and upper primary, GHS, and then a substantial formative part of the life of a Ghanaian is when you're in secondary school.
Exactly.
At least the least age you should be getting about 10 years of age, and then averagely you should get in about 15, 17, 18 years. Now that means that you have a lot of people who are at various stages of their teenage life, and this is the time that they pick up a lot of things. And this is the time, and when we talk about formation and we talk about the various levels of socialization, talk about the family, talk about the church, we talk about the school. Now, you would speak to a lot of people and you get to understand that a lot of traits that they picked, who they wanted to be and how they wanted to be.
Most of
their
it
life
was dependent on what they did in their secondary
Yes,
education.
it was shaped with their life in the senior high school. Ours is also troubling to the extent that if you go to secondary school and you read general arts, you read general science, you read business, you read agric. Sometimes when coming to the university, switching from, say, an art student into the field of the science is extremely difficult. And a lot of people have written papers, have queried why we should have a system like that. Even when it comes to the final exam, which is the WASI, if you don't pass very well, you don't pass the core subjects like science, like maths, that becomes, so for some people, that literally becomes the end
Unless
of
you
their
go back
academic.
to write maybe a November, December exam.
Yes.
And all that. Yes.
So for me, I think that the secondary school is an essential part of the formation of the Ghanaian youth, and looking at our population categorization, the youth form a great chunk of the population. And so any program that seeks to put attention on the secondary education level, for me, I think is key. Now, let's come to the issue of, let's tackle the financing first.
Exactly, the finance is very important. And I think a chart has been brought out that talks into details about the resources that was allocated by the government of Ghana from 2016 to 2020, looking at the preschool, looking at the primary, looking at the JSS, and also getting to the senior high school education or secondary education. Can you help us briefly with the details of this chart?
Well, so if you look at if you look at our funding generally, you get to the point that if the senior high school in 2012, for instance, in 2012 was about the second most highest sector of our education that received a lot of funding. Now, the primary school received 26.2% of the entire budget allocation to the educational sector in Ghana. 26.2%. Now, this was followed by the senior high school of 16.4%. And then later followed by the tertiary, the JHS of, so 26.2% primary, JHS 20.0%, and then the third actually of ACHS 16.4%. Now, if you move forward, you get that there have not been a consistent allocation of monies. Consistent as in, are we always going to put secondary school level education as, say, the first most resourced sector when it comes to the education, or the second most resourced sector when it comes to education? Having attained 16.4% of the allocation in 2012, in 2013, it increased to 18.6%, but only to dip in 2014 to 15.2%, and later to 13.3% in 2015, and then back to 15% in 2016. Interestingly, from 2017, and that is why earlier I mentioned about how this government has put some renewed focus into the secondary education. Now, for a sector that prior to 2017 was getting about an average of 12 to 15% of the allocation to various educational sectors, in 2017, 68% of the allocations from pre-tertiary school to the tertiary and even to the management level was given to the senior high school level. 68%. In 2018, this jumped to 86%. In 2019, it came to 48%. In 2020, 50%.
But wouldn't you argue that it looks like all other, say, sectors or all other stages of the educational ladder have been deprived of some finances and all have been pushed into the secondary education?
Yeah, so that argument has been made, and a lot of stakeholders within the educational sector have raised the point that we cannot continue to only focus on the secondary level, because even though I've earlier outlined the essence of the secondary level, you also agree that at a very basic level, which is the lower and upper primary and JHS, you get that it is also essential, and we've heard about how the president has made the argument for there to be just one, even the JHS system to be part of the senior high school, and the JHS system should all become one part of our educational system, so that we just have the primary level, and then the secondary level will include both the JHS and the senior high school. And there are those who are saying that we need to devote attention to the other areas. I mean, those are arguments we can go into. But I think that what organizers of this program are trying to say is that for a sector that prior to 2017 were investing less than 20% of the allocation to the educational system, to be getting at least 48% of the allocation since 2017, that sector ought to be scrutinized carefully and to see, because the saying goes, who much is given,
much is expected.
Much is expected. So if you are putting this amount of money into the senior high school, are we getting the benefits?
Question.
That's a question. And I think that these are answers that we'll be getting from the program. Are we getting the benefit? If we are not getting the benefit, what should we do? Should we cut down on the expenditure? Or should we devise other ways of meeting these expenditure timelines and redirecting some of the other expenditures to other sectors? Aside this, you also ask yourself the question, while we are investing this, are we getting the quality that we need? I mean, the government consistently has used the performance when it comes to the WASI to explain why they think that the free senior high school policy is working. Is WASI performance enough to indicate that, is WASI performance enough to judge the quality of an educational system? I mean, Professor Atu Suman, he has done some works with the West African Certificates Council, Examination Council. He will be able to explain to us what is happening with respect to judging the quality of our educational system,
because it looks
to
like
the WASI results.
In recent times, though we are having the senior high school education and also the free senior high school, it looks like the people or the badges that have been coming out or been churning out of the various institutions, that the secondary education, in a way, come out with some flying colors.
Yes, so that's what I'm saying. So, but again, and so you go to the universities, and then you speak to professors, you speak to deans, and they tell you that the caliber of students and the quality of students that they are getting
isn't what we were getting.
It's not what they were getting previously. And so you wonder what is happening there. Are we teaching students to be students who are interested in exams, or we are teaching students to actually be a student who can compete globally? When we were in the university, there was a term they used to say global citizen.
Exactly.
Now, essentially what that means is that, Philip, when you meet your colleague from the United States of America, or from London, or from Germany, are you confident enough that the education that you are receiving, you can compete at that highest level with your colleague from the other country? And so I think that this sums it up. The level of investments that we've channeled based on the figures that we've presented here indicates the need for us to look carefully at the senior high school level. And when it comes to the funding, we've been reporting about the free senior high school. I remember when free senior high school started in 2017. Those days, as a young journalist in the university, reporters were deployed to various schools.
Yes.
We had to speak them live. And then we spoke to a reporter who was in Achimota school. Reporter reported that the students just came and are going to their dormitories. I'm like, are you serious? This is Achimota school. Achimota school has allowed people who have not paid any amount of money just to enter like that. And the student says yes. And for a lot of us, we actually said that free senior high school was something that we need to help sustain. We need to help sustain because we can all agree to the funding challenge that occurs to a number of families who may not be able to fund the education of their wards. But 6 years down the line, you look at the crowding in the schools. You look at the concerns about books.
Concerns about feeding.
Concerns about feeding.
Accommodation.
Concerns about accommodation. I mean, if you look at all these things, and then there's the argument that we have an option that Philip can pay for his ward.
I remember the finance minister came out to say that if you could pay, you can pay. And also, the president of Ashesi University, Dr. What's his name? Dr. Patrick Ewa, came out to say that in advanced countries, it's not done that way. The government just takes care of your tuition. And also, when it comes to accommodation and maybe feeding, the parents could also handle that part. And this has also brought up a lot of argument on it. When the free SHS started in the senior high schools, you could tell that even some headmasters who were trying to find ways and means to run the various institutions by, in a way, taking monies from parents, had government to contend with.
Yes, and even recently, the minority leader has had cause to indicate that we need to change our direction. And that's why perhaps this Achimota Speak dialogue may give a platform for we to consider if it is time to review the free senior high school policy. The presidency at a moment were adamant to conversations about a review. Recently, we have seen some level of buying into the idea of the review.
Yes.
But as to when exactly we need to do a review, we don't know. But I think that 6 years is enough, most especially when you look at the financial challenge that we find ourselves in. We need to review and look at where we are heading towards as a people. I mean, previously the argument was that you cannot necessarily tell who can afford and who cannot afford. And so you do not want to leave any students on the side. But I think since 2017 to date, we've done credibly well with the national identification card, which is supposed to be the source document for our various levels of identification and even to be able to identify people based on the jobs they do, their income levels, and based on those analysis, we can tell those who can pay and who cannot pay. So I don't think that we have any excuse not to look at the funding again.
There's also been an argument that it should have been done progressively.
I mean, for that, if we have the capacity, which we have shown over the past 6 years, that relatively we have the capacity to give free senior high school to a greater number of students, I would always go for it. And I've said on this platform that anything that increases access to education is one that I will support. But one thing that we don't have to compromise on has to do with quality.
Exactly.
On the funding too, it has to do with the expenses we are making when it comes to boarding vis-a-vis day. Now, a lot of people argue that we can make our senior high schools in such a way that we strengthen senior high schools across all levels, so that from where I come from, Badu Senior High School, if Badu Senior High School is made to be along the same calibers of St. James Seminary Senior High School, which I actually attended, and I live in Badu, I should be able to go to Badu Senior High School and not go to a boarding school. In that instance, government is saving costs. And if you look at when it comes to SHS, number of students, when it comes to D, there are about 130,310 students. Fee per semester, that's 981.6 cedis. That amounts to 127,912,296 Ghana cedis. Now, this is the fee paid for all students, the 130,000 students for the 2022 academic year. This amounts for 23% of the free SHS budget. Boarding school, over 304,000 students. The fee we pay for every student per semester is 1,438 Ghana cedis. The total amount we paid for the first semester of 2022 was 437,416,400 Ghana cedis. That's 77%. Now, Philip, imagine we are able to even cut the cost in the boarding by half.
And allow maybe parent and also the feeding and the accommodation should be dealt with by parents. If
out of these 300, and if we are supposed to, it was a reverse, and we have 304,057 students who are day students rather, the number will actually reduce, and then we'll be making some savings here. Now that savings can go into the construction of the dormitories, can go into the completion of the of the academic facilities, can go into the construction of ICT labs, of science labs, and then you may be putting in this same amount of money. You may be putting in 565,328,696 Ghana cedis. You may be putting this amount of money for just the first semester, but you can perhaps build about one classroom block in about 10 or 15 or 20 schools. So that, and if you go to the schools, the size of the class is key. And if you listen to people who have done research, if you listen to teachers, I don't know if you've been a teacher before, but if you listen to teachers, they'll tell you that the fewer the students in a class, the better. The more you're able to monitor, the more you're able to teach them appropriately. So I think that all these are options we'll be looking at, the Achimota Speaks program will be looking at when it comes to funding, as to free SHS, the current form of giving the funds to the senior high school level or the secondary education level. Should we maintain it? Should we change it? If we are changing it, how should we do it? These things about day students vis-a-vis border students. These issues about the amount of money we spend when it comes to feeding. Do we have to feed all students when it comes to those who are day and those who are borders? And then, of course, from the funding, it will come to the management. And the management is very key. How do we make sure that the schools are running appropriately? And how do we make sure that we get the quality? How do we combine governance and management to make sure that we get the quality? I mean, there's a pattern that you can guessily draw. If you look at schools that are of some ties to some religious organization or churches, the missionary schools. I mean, if you look at these schools, just mention your top schools, you get that they are somehow linked to some missions. And so,
and some of us get key support from the old students.
Yes.
Yes.
And
you'd go to some of the top schools, you notice that, well, the old students are doing very well when it comes to issues of infrastructure and also the equipment that is needed, or teaching and learning materials. In recent times, we saw the issue of Bishop Herman, where their building in a way was very deplorable when they had to call on old students and the government to help address this issue. It's obvious that the amount that have been mentioned here doesn't really reflect in what is being done in the various schools, because you would notice that headmasters are complaining about no food. In recent times, we had the issue about CHAS. They coming out to say that we don't have the allocations that have been made for feeding in the various schools, so the reopening dates will have to be postponed or something of that sort. And now government will also come out, okay, fine, the amount has been provided and also students are supposed to go to school. The minority has come out to complain extensively about the feeding issue in the various schools. The national food buffer stock has also come out. The issue is enormous.
Now, I mean, can the funding be increased? Will it be essential to increase the funding? Yes. Is the funding that is given to the schools now relatively adequate? That will have to do some deeper analysis into that to look into it. But we need to contextualize it and look at the situation that we are in. Certainly, the current economic challenges will be a problem. Now, allocations, I'm sure that these schools, if they get the allocations that they've been given, that will help them. But because of the cash flow challenges, sometimes getting clearance from the Ministry of Finance for some of these things becomes a problem. And when it comes to the education, when it comes to the management and the governance, I think one to also look at is decentralization, where decisions are made. Every time decisions are made at the top, can a system be devised so that there'll be more power at the local level for the various local education directorates to take some decisions?
So all is set for Accra. Achimota speak to commence at the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences. That is happening at 6 p.m. exactly. And also the topic is on governance, management and financing of secondary education in Ghana. We'll cross over and bring you live feed of what is happening there at the event grounds.
Can you believe one of your panelists was asking me where CSIR is? I won't tell you which panelist it is. Hey, you don't know where CSIR is in Ghana? 5. And from the Ghana Academy of Arts and Sciences in Accra, this is Achimota Speaks. A very good evening to our invited guests here in Accra and our viewers all over the world. Welcome to a platform created to bring ideas together to shape a nation's future. Tonight we'll be talking about the governance, management and financing of secondary education in Ghana under the auspices of this platform, which hopes to bring to bear some important thoughts and ideas about Ghana's educational sector. My name is Bernard Avle. I am a radio and TV host at City FM, and I'm the MC moderator for today's program. If you're watching us on social media, please like the video and share, and invite as many people as possible to be here with us. Tonight, we're going to hear from some very important people who've been thinking deeply about Ghana's secondary education. They would present a few ideas in the form of a speech, and the rest would have a panel discussion. We've assembled a wide array of stakeholders from students, academics, past students, business leaders, politicians, policymakers, to help us deliberate on this important topic. To set us off, I want to invite to give us an opening prayer a key member of the planning committee who happens as well to be an old student of Achimota School. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Akora Elizabeth Irene Beatty to bring us the opening prayer.
Ladies and gentlemen, a word of prayer, please. Heavenly Father, we have come together this evening from various walks of life, but with one common focus, Lord, the secondary system in our beloved country. Father, we gather here at a time when children are seeking to access secondary education in numbers like never before, bringing unprecedented pressure on our educational system. Lord, we ask for your stimulating spirit to liven our thinking, quicken our discussion, so that we are able to deliberate and find a way forward, to the end that educational outcomes for our young learners will be improved and your name may be glorified. Amen.
Thank you very much, Akora Elizabeth Irene Beatty. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure for those of you who are here, Achimota Speaks may not be new, but for a lot of you watching, you are wondering, what is Achimota Speaks? What kind of platform is it, and what does it seek to do? To give us some insights into this and to also contextualize tonight's program, it's my pleasure to invite the president of the OAA, Akora Joel Nete. Please put your hands together for him to bring us his welcome address.
Good evening, Akora's friends of Achimota, ladies and gentlemen. Achimota Speaks started some 6 years ago when Achimota School turned 90. And as part of the 90th, year-long 90th anniversary celebrations, we started a monthly series of activities that we called Achimota Speaks. So Achimota Speaks essentially is a platform, as envisaged, where conversations around topical issues in this country of ours could be had. It's not a platform strictly for Achimotans by Achimotans. When we Achimotans leave Achimota School, we are enjoined to go out as living waters to a thirsty land. This land of ours, this Ghana land of ours, indeed is very thirsty. Our school motto, Ut omnes onum sint, translated also means that all may be one. So with those two things in mind, to set forth and go out as living waters to a thirsty land, and keeping in mind that all may be one, Achimota Speaks is thus a platform that essentially is a platform started by Achimotans, but that brings in Ghana, who's minded to think about today, essentially, is that by courtesy of the Old Achimotan Association, at least twice a year, Achimota will speak on this platform. Once in March and once in November. For this year's first session, the topic is on education. In November, the planning committee is thinking around what's the most topical issue in Ghana today. If I asked you, you probably would say something around finance. We are still talking. So I assure you that in November, there will be another Achimota Speaks on a topical issue. It will be the most topical issue in our country at that time. But that's the context of Achimota Speaks. So the question has been asked several times, why are there non-Achimotans on your platform? It's not a platform only for Achimotans. It's championed by Achimotans, but it's a platform for anybody, any Ghanaian who's concerned about issues Ghana. So let's talk about our topic for today. So today the topic of conversation is education. And we've put together a panel, a chairman, a keynote speaker and panelists who are A gamers in that general, on that general topic. And why did we choose that some computer has decided that they should go to another school is sick? Any system where a school's capacity is X and it sends X times 2 is sick. Any system where we force people not to pay fees where they can afford to pay is sick. Any system where, because we do not have the wherewithal to actually go through the process of determining who it is that is indeed needy and give them free education, and give those of us who can and are blessed enough to afford the chance to afford, so that together we can raise the quality of education instead of pushing it down, is sick. But sick doesn't mean dead. And that's why we are hopeful that in having these conversations, we can cure this sick system. And so, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Achimota Speaks on the subject of the governance and policies around secondary education in Ghana. But you didn't come here to listen to me. And there are definitely more qualified people in this room to speak to the subject. What we decided to do today is not to spend time on the qualifications of the people we have in this room, because we'll spend several hours. So all our intros are going to be very short. And I'll start with a very short intro for our chairperson. Our chairperson, if I were to do a regular intro, will probably be like 6 pages long. I'll just shorten it briefly and say he is a past Vice Chancellor of the University of Ghana. He is a die-in-the-wool Achimotan. He is an educationist through and through. He is passionate about the quality of education in Ghana, and perhaps most importantly, he is the man whose shoes I am struggling to fill as the immediate past president of the Old Achimotan Association. Ladies and gentlemen, our chairman is no other than Accra Professor Ernest Aite. Prof, your audience. A very short intro for our chairperson. Our chairperson, if I were to do a regular intro, Chancellor he is passionate about the quality of education in Ghana, and perhaps most importantly, he is the man whose shoes I am struggling to fill as the immediate past president of the Old Achimotan Association. Ladies and gentlemen, our chairman is no other than Accra Professor Ernest Aite. Prof, your audience.
Thank you very much, Joel. One of the things I often do is when I see another Ghanaian, I look to see whether he's taller than me, bigger than me, and like Joel is one that easily. The first time I saw him, I was looking at him, trying to determine whether due to our own upbringing, how we went to school, influenced by that, the kind of homes we came from. For some, maybe due to what we studied or what we went through later in life. So our own life experiences have helped us to adapt one way or the other to how schools should be run. And today, I believe that the panelists that we'll be listening to have all their own experiences that have informed what they think about the way forward for the secondary school system that we have. Joel described the system as sick, and he gave quite a number of illustrations of what makes the system sick. I agree entirely with everything that he said. You know, I was wondering if I was in his shoes, I would have used the word sick. Have helped us to adapt one way or the other to how